I met Ethan when we were both working the evening shift at a small coffee shop in Portland. I was 22, a senior majoring in communications, while he was 31, long out of school but still struggling with nearly a decade of student debt. Ethan wasn't like the other men who had passed through my life. He wasn't charming or full of empty promises, but there was something in the way he looked at me that made me feel genuinely heard. We started talking after a few shifts together. Mostly about small things, like how the espresso machine always broke down at the busiest hour, or how he always played jazz in the background, even though no one but me seemed to notice. After just a few weeks, I got used to bringing him a pastry at the end of our shift, and he always quietly waited for me to lock up so we could walk to the bus stop together. We weren't officially dating, we just grew into each other. My family wasn't well off. My parents divorced when I was in high school. My mom worked night shifts as a nurse, and my dad had moved to another state with his new wife. I'd always been independent, studying, working, and saving every penny so I wouldn't have to move back in with my mom after graduation. Ethan had a difficult family story too. His father had a gambling addiction and his mother was always scrambling to cover the debts. He once said something that stuck with me: "I'm not afraid of being poor, I'm afraid of being stuck." I remember looking at him for a long time after that. Maybe because that fear felt so familiar to me too. After I graduated, I was lucky to get a full-time job at an ad agency. The pay wasn't great, but it was stable. I rented a small apartment in the suburbs of Beaverton. Not too far from downtown, but quiet enough for me to breathe after long days. Ethan was still working part-time as a barista and occasionally picking up event setup jobs for extra cash. He told me he hadn't finished paying off his student loans, and because his income was unstable, he couldn't get approved for a decent place to live. I knew he was trying. I could see it in the dark circles under his eyes after late-night shifts. And maybe that's why I said it so naturally. I didn't even realize I was offering. "Why don't you move in with me for a while?" He hesitated, then asked quietly, "Are you sure? I don't want to be a burden." "Ethan, I'm not trying to rescue anyone. I just don't want to see you crashing on couches week after week." We moved in together on a late fall afternoon. I still remember, he showed up with one suitcase and 3 boxes of books. He said, "This is everything I have left." And I didn't say a word. I just handed him a hanger. From that day, I took on most of the rent, almost 80%. Ethan paid the rest and we split the utilities evenly. I told him to focus on paying off his debt as long as he helped keep the apartment tidy. The place was small but cozy. I liked waking up earlier than him, brewing coffee and letting him sleep in. In the evenings, I cooked while he played music, still jazz. Even when we were tired, it felt peaceful. He'd sometimes sit on the floor, lean back against the sofa, and say to me, "I never imagined anyone would give me a place to come home to, thank you." At first I thought it was just temporary. I told myself Ethan was trying, that he just needed some stability, someone to believe in him, and then he'd find his rhythm again. But 6 months passed, then 8, and I started to feel tired. Even though my job at the agency kept me out from 8 in the morning until after 6 in the evening, I was still the one cooking dinner, doing laundry, cleaning, grocery shopping on weekends, and covering most of the rent. Ethan still hadn't found anything more stable than his part-time barista gig downtown, which only covered his portion. I didn't expect him to split everything evenly, but at the very least, take out the trash. That was the only thing I asked. Since he usually ate dinner last, all I wanted was for him to take the trash out on his way down to check the mail. It took less than 2 minutes, but every time I reminded him, he'd give me a sheepish smile and say, "Sorry, I forgot. I'll do it next time." That next time happened so often I memorized the exact tone in his voice and the way he shrugged like I was overreacting. I had thought about having a serious conversation, not snippy comments after work, but a real calm talk. So one late night in early spring, I wrote him a letter. I didn't want to blame or complain, I just shared a few small things that hurt me, that I felt like I was becoming invisible in my own apartment, that I needed some kind of partnership, not financial but emotional, presence, respect. I left the letter on the table between his notebook and the coffee mug he always used. The next morning it was still there. 3 days later, I saw him using the notebook to prop up a glass of water. The letter had been folded and tucked inside, never opened. I didn't bring it up. I didn't write another. I quietly retreated into routine, cooking, cleaning, paying bills. And Ethan kept coming home, dropping his shoes in the hallway, collapsing on the couch, remote in hand, complaining about how demanding the customers were. That week, I had to work Saturday because our project was nearing its final stage. I left some food in the fridge and texted Ethan to remind him to reheat it before eating. He didn't reply, but I figured he was busy. That night, I got home close to 10 p.m., completely drained. I just wanted to lie down in bed and take a deep breath in a clean space. But as soon as I opened the door, I froze. Snack crumbs covered the floor, soda cans rolled around the living room. The kitchen smelled like someone had baked a pizza and forgotten it in the oven. The dining table was a mess of paper plates, cookie boxes, and instant noodle wrappers. I walked into the kitchen. Dirty dishes overflowed in the sink, grease smeared across the countertop. A huge trash bag sat by the door, lid popped open, banana peels and tissues spilling out. Wet clothes were scattered inside the washing machine, probably left there since the day before. I stood in the middle of the mess, not knowing where to start. My eyes stung, not from the garbage smell but from the feeling that I'd just walked into a place that no longer felt like home. Ethan appeared from the bedroom, holding a can of beer, scratching his head. "Oh, you're home?" I was going to clean up, but I lay down for a bit and fell asleep. He looked around and gave a lazy smile. "Yeah, it's kind of messy, but I'll clean it tomorrow, okay?" I stayed still. I just walked into the bathroom, washed my face for a long time, then quietly returned to the kitchen and started cleaning. I needed to make this apartment feel like a place I could breathe again. Ethan never came near. He sat back on the couch, kept watching the sports show. I could hear the announcer's voice between the sound of a beer can popping open. I realized maybe he never truly saw this place as home. That night, after scrubbing down the kitchen and picking up every last crumb from the living room floor, I faced Ethan and met his gaze, and said in the calmest voice I'd ever used, "Starting next month you'll pay half the rent, and I'm no longer cooking, doing laundry, or cleaning for you." Ethan raised his eyebrows like he'd just heard something absurd. "What?" he asked, narrowing his eyes with suspicion. "I'm not your maid, I'm not your mother, I'm your roommate. And if you still want to live here, you need to share responsibility fairly." He scoffed. "It's not like I ever asked you to do any of that." "You didn't ask," I repeated. "But you never said thank you either." Ethan sat down, ran his hand through his hair. "Kinsley, you're overreacting. My mom used to do everything for my dad and she never complained." I froze. That sentence felt like ice water poured straight down my spine. Women weren't born to inherit someone else's mother's chores. Without a word, I went to my room, closed the door, and wrote a to-do list. One that didn't include him. Ethan's name wasn't on it anywhere. From that day on, I changed. I woke up early, made breakfast just for myself, and left the kitchen spotless every time I used it. I bought a small laundry basket just for me, so my clothes wouldn't get mixed with his constant pile. I even installed a small digital lock on the washer, only I knew the code. At first, Ethan thought I was sulking. He didn't lift a finger, still left his wet socks on the couch, dirty dishes in the sink, and waited for me to cave like before. But I didn't budge. When he asked, "Aren't you cooking anything?" I replied, "I already ate." When he frowned at his wrinkled clothes, "Where's my white dress shirt?" I just said, "It's not mine." One time, he was late for work because he couldn't find a single clean pair of socks. I watched him run around the apartment tugging at his hair, cursing, then looking at me like I was the reason his world was falling apart. I just sipped my coffee, read the newspaper, and stayed silent, like I lived in a completely separate life. A week later, my company held its first quarter review meeting. Even though the recent project had been intense, I gave it my all, and for the first time that effort was recognized. My boss, Cynthia, stood at the center of the room, smiling as she spoke. "I want to give a special thank you to Kinsley. No one expected someone who's been here less than a year to turn such a tough campaign into a creative win. She not only worked hard but had excellent instincts. Kinsley, fantastic job." Everyone applauded. I blushed but couldn't stop myself from smiling. That evening, at home, I told Ethan the story while reheating leftover pasta. He was sitting in front of the TV, beer can next to the remote. He listened, said nothing. When I ended the story with a joke, My boss even called me a woman who leads. He gave a dry laugh. Yeah, because women these days only care about leading. What do you mean? He shrugged, his eyes colder now. Nothing, just sometimes I wonder if you want a boyfriend or a subordinate. I tightened my grip on the glass in my hand but didn't react. I got it now. Ethan didn't want a partner. He wanted someone to serve him and admire him quietly, unconditionally. I said calmly, "If you want to be served, find someone else. I'm not her anymore." Ethan had no words, but for the first time, that usual smug look in his eyes was gone. In its place, confusion. I didn't care what he was thinking. I was finally learning to think for myself. About 2 weeks after that quarterly meeting, I walked through the front door after work and found Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, sweating, holding a bank debt notice. Before I could say anything, he spoke first. "Kinsley, can you lend me $2,000? I set my bag down on the chair. "For what?" Ethan looked at me, so straight, so shameless. "I want to buy an engagement ring for Bella." I laughed. I didn't know if it was from shock or bitterness, but there wasn't a trace of humor in it. "Come again?" His face didn't change. "Bella is kind, mature, and traditional. I think she deserves a proper ring." "And you think I'll help you buy a ring to propose to another woman?" I asked, my voice so cold it startled even me. Ethan blinked. "It's not like that. I mean, you always supported me. You believed I could do anything." I held his gaze, then slowly shook my head. "No, Ethan, I used to believe, but that belief is gone." I simply took out my phone, opened the banking app, and transferred my final month's rent payment, my half, to the landlord. Then I looked up and said clearly and firmly, "You have until the end of the month to move out of this apartment." The next night, Ethan came home reeking of beer, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. 3 short knocks landed on my bedroom door, then pushed it open like this was still his home. I was folding laundry, so I just glanced over and asked, "What is it?" He leaned against the doorframe, slurring slightly. "I don't get it. Why are you being so cold?" I set the pile of shirts aside. "Because I've run out of reasons to be kind to someone who only knows how to belittle decency." Ethan laughed. "This is all about that marketing team lead position, huh? You think you're hot stuff now? Think you don't need anyone, so you're kicking me out of your life? It's not because I'm good at what I do, it's because I refuse to become a shadow in someone else's story." He stepped into the room, raising his voice. "Women these days are terrifying. Always strong, independent, don't want to be wives, just want to be the boss. I'm not afraid of being a wife. I'm afraid of marrying someone who makes me apologize to myself every day." Ethan went silent for a moment, like he'd just been slapped with ice water in the middle of the night. I walked to the door and opened it. "I'm tired. Say whatever you need to say, then let me have some peace." He searched my face for one final flicker of sympathy. "Bella can give me the kind of life you never could," he said. "Well, congratulations," I smiled. "You should go be with her. And don't come back here again." 3 days before Ethan's move-out deadline, I came home late after finalizing the plan for a new brand campaign. I was looking forward to a hot shower, a bit of salad, and a few chapters of the book I'd been meaning to finish. But the moment I stepped in, everything stopped. In the living room, under the warm yellow light, the scene burned my eyes. Ethan was lounging on the sofa, and beside him was a blonde woman in a tight dress, holding a large designer bag. She had her legs propped on the coffee table and was laughing loudly as Ethan poured wine into her glass. I recognized her immediately. Bella, the woman Ethan once called just a close coworker. The one he planned to propose to, with a ring he wanted to buy using money I was supposed to lend him. The one he said was sweet, traditional, and not like you. No warning call, no text asking if I'd be home early. I paused for a moment, then acknowledged them with a slight tilt of my head. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice steady. Bella glanced at me, lips tight, eyes indifferent. "Oh," she said slowly, "I thought you'd already moved out." Without a word, I set my coat on the chair and walked to my bedroom. But as I finished changing and went out to get water, I heard Bella's voice from the living room. "Are you serious? I still don't get why you lived with someone like that for 2 years. Ethan's laugh rang out. "Trust me, I don't know how I lasted that long either. But she was convenient. Covered most of the rent, cooked, cleaned, didn't complain like other girls." I froze behind the door, my hand clenched around the cabinet edge. Bella snorted with a sneer in her tone. Wow, you really let her support you. Not exactly support, Ethan replied, like he was reminiscing about an old joke. I just took advantage, really. I mean, back when I was dead broke, who wouldn't want someone willing to pay 80% of the rent without asking questions? Then he added, in a tone I'll never forget. She always tried to please me. Kinda sad, honestly, but she had no spark. You know me, I was never into plain girls. I stood motionless. Not because I was surprised, but because his words confirmed everything I had long suspected. I had been used. Not just for money, but for my trust. I didn't walk out. I didn't confront them. I returned to my room, quietly opened the drawer, and pulled out an old trash bag I'd saved for getting rid of clutter. One by one, I removed every photo from the walls, those snapshots I once thought were real. I took down every memory, like peeling off a mask I'd worn too long. I stared at the bare white wall in front of me and knew I'd just turned the page. No more halfway. No more forgiving selfishness disguised as love. Ethan could sit there with his wine and his new girl, but me? I wouldn't let this end in silence. I began drafting a plan, carefully, in a way Ethan could never see coming. 2 months after Ethan moved out, I had settled back into my rhythm. No more beer cans popping after work, no more sink filled with dishes I didn't use, no more blank stares that treated my effort like obligation. The apartment had turned into a quiet little world I hadn't realized I would love this much. But then, on a Tuesday evening as I entered the apartment lobby and checked my mailbox, I found an ivory envelope with gold trim. Printed on the front were the names of 2 people I had no desire to ever see again. Ethan Brooks and Bella Ashford. I lingered at the doorway, fingers tight around the envelope, then opened it once I was inside. It was an ornate, extravagant wedding invitation, clearly stating the ceremony would be held at an estate in the suburbs of Lake Oswego, a place only well-off families could afford to host an event. But what made me freeze wasn't the invitation itself. It was the handwritten note in the top left corner. Crooked, but unmistakable. Kinsley, you should come see the life I was meant to have. I read it again, then again. Not because I didn't believe my eyes, but because I couldn't believe someone could be that petty. A wedding invitation meant not to share joy, but to flaunt, to trample, to declare victory. I held the card in my hand, staring at that line like it was the final drop that tipped the glass. But instead of getting angry, I laughed. Ethan was still Ethan, still thinking that changing his shirt and his girlfriend could cover up the emptiness at his core. I set the invitation down, opened my laptop, and started searching. Bella Ashford. Her Instagram was still public. No surprise for someone who loved to show off. I scrolled quickly through carefully filtered photos. Wine parties, resort check-ins. Then I paused on a series of pictures from 7 months ago. The man standing next to Bella in those photos was named Jake Carson. Tall, kind smile, eyes that felt genuine. In one of the captions, Bella had written, 7 years with one person. But the photos suddenly stopped, and Jake was gone from every post after that. I opened Facebook, searched his full name, and found him. A simple profile picture, just an ordinary man. Nothing flashy, nothing fake. I sent a friend request, and to my surprise he accepted it 10 minutes later. I sent a short, honest message. Sorry if this is strange, I'm Kinsley, Ethan's ex. I know you dated Bella. I just wanted to ask you something. The message was read 2 days later. But when he replied, I read every word, over and over. Hi Kinsley, yes, I'm Jake. I was with Bella for almost a decade and I never imagined she could cheat until I saw her and Ethan in my car. We kept talking. Each message from Jake painted a fuller picture. Not just of Bella, but of things I hadn't dared believe before. Bella had cheated, more than once, and the last time had been with Ethan, while she and Jake were still living together. You're the second one they've stepped on, I wrote back, and now they think they can do it again, at their wedding. Jake was silent for a while, then asked, Are you going? I am, but I don't want to go alone. I took a deep breath and sent one last message. Would you be my +1? The typing bubble appeared. 1 minute. Then 2. Finally he replied. I'll come. Not to get revenge, but to look them in the eye. And let them know we're no longer the ones left behind. That afternoon the Oregon sun glowed golden, spreading across rows of white silk-covered chairs by the lake. The wedding was outdoors, held at a luxurious mansion once featured in an architectural magazine for its classic American elegance. The violin played a familiar wedding tune as Jake and I walked through the gate, not holding hands but perfectly in sync. From the moment we entered, I felt the shift in the air. Curious glances turned our way, whispers rising between flutes of champagne and awkward laughter. But I didn't care. And Jake? He walked like he belonged there. Ethan saw me first. He was standing by the archway, shaking hands with some distant relatives, when he froze. In a split second, his eyes landed on Jake. And I saw it clearly. His face turned pale, jaw clenched, his hand squeezing the invitation so tightly it nearly creased. But he couldn't do anything. Not now. Not in front of nearly 200 guests, many of whom were Bella's family's business associates. Ethan simply turned away, lips pressed tight. And I knew he was swallowing a rage he couldn't spit out. The ceremony began a few minutes later. As soft music filled the air, the guests rose to their feet, ready for the bride's entrance. Bella appeared in a stunning white gown, her arm looped through her father's, taking graceful steps along the flower-strewn path. Her eyes swept the crowd, then landed on me. And Jake? Bella's eyes widened like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. For a moment she faltered, her grip on her father's arm tightened. Then, maybe prompted by Ethan's stare at the end of the aisle, she moved forward, but the confusion never left her face. The wedding proceeded by the book. Ethan read his vows first. His voice flat, devoid of emotion. When it was Bella's turn, she took the mic. Then suddenly asked to excuse herself for a few minutes because she was feeling a little lightheaded. Ethan stiffened, but he couldn't stop her, not in front of all those eyes. Bella stepped quietly off the stage, lifting the hem of her long dress, her eyes never leaving Jake. A few minutes passed, then 10, then 20. The ceremony couldn't continue. Ethan started pacing, turning repeatedly, whispering questions to the bridesmaids and family members. Then suddenly an event coordinator stepped onto the stage, holding a folded piece of paper, his face pale. He whispered something to the DJ and the music stopped instantly. The crowd fell silent. The coordinator spoke, his voice slightly trembling. Apologies for the interruption, but the bride has left behind a letter addressed to everyone present here today. A wave of murmur spread across the room. He unfolded the letter and began to read aloud. To Ethan and everyone who took the time to be here today. I know I owe you all an explanation. The truth is, when I saw Jake, I realized my heart had never truly left that man. I made a mistake, letting fleeting emotions and admiration cloud my judgment. Ethan, you are an ambitious man, but I can't enter a marriage I'm not fully committed to. I'm sorry for letting it go this far. I've left the estate, and I hope everyone can understand my decision. As the final word was read, the entire hall went quiet. Ethan didn't move. His eyes were wide, stunned, still clutching the wedding ring he never got to place. Someone in the audience let out a stifled laugh. Cameras began clicking. Jake sat beside me, silent. So was I. Our eyes met. No words, no reaction needed. No words. Everything had been said in that silence. Ethan turned his head, eyes scanning as if looking for someone to blame. He passed over me and stopped. No flinch, just a small deliberate smile. Enough for him to know it was over. The game he staged to show off his triumph had backfired. The reception unraveled in chaos. Some guests left early, others live-streamed the letter reading. And just 3 hours later, a video titled, "Bride Walks Out Mid-Wedding at Lavish Lake Oswego Ceremony" was already online. Jake and I left quietly. I thought that after that day, Ethan would quietly disappear from my life like a wound that heals on its own with time. 3 days after the wedding fell apart, on a Sunday morning, just as I opened the door to head to the grocery store, I found Ethan standing right outside my apartment. Shirt wrinkled, eyes sunken, hair a mess. He didn't look like someone heartbroken. He looked like someone who had just lost every card in the game. "Feel proud now?" His first words, no greeting. I stayed calm, arms crossed. "Why are you here?" Ethan stepped closer, pointing at me like I was the root of every disaster. "You ruined my life. Do you even know what you did? You brought Jake to the wedding just to humiliate me." I looked at him for a long moment, then replied slowly, "I didn't ruin your wedding. You destroyed it yourself with your own greed and lies." Ethan opened his mouth to say something, but I raised my hand, cutting him off. "And if you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police. Believe me, I'm not bluffing." He stepped back half a foot, eyes still burning red. "You always think you're so righteous, don't you?" I didn't answer. I closed the door in his face, not letting another word in. That same afternoon, I called the locksmith to change all the locks. At the same time, I scheduled the installation of a hallway security camera. I wasn't going to live in fear of a man who didn't know how to stop. I also blocked all contact from Ethan. Calls, texts, social media. Whatever he lost, I wasn't going to return. And whatever I lost because of him, I didn't want it back. It wasn't worth it. A week later, Jake texted and asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. He said he had something to share and Bella would be joining. I hesitated but eventually agreed, not out of curiosity, but because I needed closure for everything left unfinished. We met at a small cafe on a hill where the air always carried a soft scent of pine, and the background music never drowned out real conversation. Bella arrived first. She no longer wore the overdone outfits, just a simple beige sweater, light makeup. She looked more real. "Kinsley," she said as she saw me. Her voice was no longer haughty but gentle, sincere. "I know no apology can undo what happened, but I still want to say, I'm sorry. For underestimating you, for believing Ethan, and for thinking you were someone easy to manipulate." Jake, sitting beside her, gave a small nod. "Thank you for giving us the chance to end this peacefully." Bella continued, eyes steady. "Back then, I was jealous of you. You were too strong, independent. You didn't need anyone to protect you. I hated how I couldn't live that way, so I acted superior." I gave a faint smile. "And you realized that?" "I did. When I stood between two men and saw only one truly respected me. I didn't ask who, I already knew." We left the cafe after nearly an hour of talking. As we stepped onto the sidewalk, I noticed a sign in front of another coffee shop. "Now hiring part-time. Experience preferred." The sign made me smile, soft, almost to myself. Jake asked, "What is it?" I pointed to the words. Back then, Ethan and I met because of a sign just like that. A coffee shop, a part-time job, and a foolish girl who thought, "He needs me." Jake chuckled softly. "And now?" I gripped my coat tighter, took a deep breath. "I don't need to be needed to feel alive. I live on my own terms now." And I knew after everything I no longer carried anger, but I also had no desire to be tied to them again. I returned to my apartment that afternoon, sunlight spilling through the window. I brewed a cup of tea, opened my laptop, and started planning a short trip to Arizona. It had been a long time since I felt like myself again. And this time, I wasn't running away, I was beginning anew. With the lightness of someone no longer carrying anyone else's weight. My story isn't about revenge. It's about awakening. I once traded time, money, and trust for someone who didn't deserve any of it. Just because I was afraid of being alone. But only when I was hurt to my core did I learn how to stand tall on my own. No one gets to define my worth but me. And if you're exhausted from constantly proving your love, remember, you don't have to suffer to stay in someone else's life. What do you think of Kinsley's choice and that unexpected ending at the wedding? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss the next emotional and powerful story.